I want to go ahead and start our next panel here, which is the four-ring circus of animation production and management. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Connie, thank you for being here with us. Could you explain why the four-ring circus?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I guess there's no significance to the number 4. I was just thinking about it's more than your regular circus. Production management requires, constant prioritizing and reprioritizing, communication, staying nimble, and learning to wear a lot of different hats. Also balancing the needs of your boss and your boss's boss, which, sometimes can be hard to know what those needs are. Sometimes that's where communication comes in, asking questions. Balancing the studio goals versus the creative needs of the project, the movie or the TV show. Balancing the needs of the budget and the schedule, as well as the standard of quality that you want to hit for this movie. The needs of the team and the needs of an individual artist. If you're a production supervisor or a PA, you're talking to individual artists all day long. But the big picture is, what does the team, the department as a whole need, as well as that artist? And then what does the movie need? And then what does the studio need? So it's wearing a lot of hats, a lot of juggling, a lot of plate spinning, all of those metaphors and analogies apply.
Very cool. And I was wondering if we could just take a moment to maybe have everyone introduce themselves before we get started.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start. I'm Connie Thompson. I'm a producer at Warner Brothers, Warner Animation Group, in the development department. So I'm developing all of the movies up to the green light, and then we hand it off to a team that's going into pre-production and production on that movie. And I've been there for 3.5 years, and I worked with this group of fantastic people. We were all at Walt Disney feature animation together. I'm not going to say what dates because that would date us all. That would be horrible. But it's where I learned, most of what I know about production management has served me for many years after I left Disney. So I guess I'll just say some names. So also joining us are Kathleen, Gavin, who ran all of the production management training, as well as all the other things she did at Disney. So I really hold her up as the person who taught me much of what I know. So Kathleen, wave.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, that's Kathleen. Patty Adams. Hello. And Angela Lepito. There she is. And Troy Nethercott, who's at Warner Brothers with me now. So that's our team. And you're hearing from a really great and experienced group of people. So strap in. It's going to be a fun hour.
Where are all the, I don't know really where Patty and Angela are right now. Where are you? Not, I realize you're home. I don't mean that.
Room.
You can't see them.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say I'm currently at DreamWorks. I manage the story department and the art department on the feature side.
Great.
So, yeah.
Sorry.
What about you, Patty?
And after leaving Disney, I went up to Canada, worked on production on a few films up there, and then went to Blizzard Entertainment and worked as a producer for many years there, and then went to Disney TV Animation, and I'm currently working at Disney in corporate. I was working at Disney Plus for a little bit, and now I'm in corporate.
Cool.
A little bit of everything. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
that's the Dorothy McKim route. Dorothy McKim has done everything under the face of the sun, and it's kept her engaged and happy for many years.
it is true. It's a good way to do it. So we kind of separated this topic because it's a big one, and we're just going to touch the tip of the iceberg, I think, today in this hour. But try to separate it into 3 main topics of things we could talk about: communication, anticipating, and taking care of yourself, meaning what's your career path on the production management side up through the levels, up through the production management ladder. there is a ton of overlap in these three areas. So you're going to find we talk about communication when anticipating, communication when taking care of your career path, and anticipating in all of the other areas. So there's a fair amount of overlap, but we're going to just start with those three main sections. And do not hesitate to put your questions into the chat, because we would love to answer your questions as you think of them, and not be too formal about waiting till the end to answer your questions. So maybe we just start in on the communication part. I think one of the things, Kathleen, you wanted to talk about was managing up.
Well, I think in general, we're very clear on the idea that, you see all those charts, right? And your name's in that little box with little lines coming down, and you have to manage all of that. But I truly believe that one of the critical pieces of being successful as a manager is understanding how to manage up, and also to foster the idea of the people working for you managing you. And by that, if I'm going to make good decisions, I have to know that there are decisions to be made, and you can't just assume I know that. So I want people who are working for me to come to me and make sure I understand what situations are, what things, give me the information so that I can make my best decisions. The same thing occurs for people I work for. I always said I didn't want Peter Schneider to be at the studio and be asked a question that I knew the answer to. Because if he says, I don't know, then his credibility goes down, right? And I need him to be really credible to get stuff that I want. It is totally self-serving to manage up. And it's to make sure that if I want the decisions made in a timely fashion that need to be made by other people, then I better be on it, and I better be talking to them, and I better be explaining what the situation is. And the other side of that too is you manage sideways as well.
Yeah.
That particularly in a process like animation, where things flow from one department to another, you have to really work at managing on either side of you. And sometimes we think managing is a pejorative. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as a way to keep things smoothly running and to make sure I'm getting what I need for my department.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, so I want to shout out to, there was an article, Kathleen, that you distributed to a lot of us when we were training under you from the Harvard Business Review called Managing Up, I believe.
Yeah, it's a great article. It really,
called Managing Your Boss.
Oh, Managing Your Boss. Even better.
Managing Your Boss.
Yeah.
I think I've actually, in my retirement, I've worked with kids coming out of foster care and getting their first jobs. And, they just go, well, I've got this job. Everybody should believe me now. Everybody should, you're like, no, that's not how it works.
I'm done. I got the job.
Right. You have to be able to communicate. You're talking about communication, and that communication is up, down, and sideways. And that's the really critical piece. And that is a great article. Oddly, I was given it by an HR person who said, this is something you do. I had never really thought about it until the HR person at Disney said, you know what? This is what you do. Here, read this. So I went, oh, it has a name.
Well, I have copied and recopied mine so many times, it's kind of hard to read now, but I've given
it to a lot of people too. Yeah.
Everybody who works with me, because it's so helpful. There's a scene at the beginning of Joe versus the Volcano where you're hearing one side of a conversation, and he's saying, I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? I know he can get the job. I'm not arguing that, but can he do the job? And it's exactly what you're talking about. Once you're in the door, what makes you successful in that position? And understanding the needs of your boss and how they want to be communicated to. That was one of the little case studies in that article.
What they need to do their job,
Yeah.
And like I say, the other side of that is you, to be successful as a manager, have to make sure the people working for you are comfortable managing you.
Telling you what they need.
Tone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll do that now. Since reading that article, I try to do that when I start a job, is ask that question in the first day. Like, how do you want to be communicated to? Do you want me to stand in your door with an issue? Do you want me to email you? Do you want me to call you? Do you want me to walk you from one meeting to another? Is that your best time to answer a question? Or all of the above? You know, which is the best way? Because some forms of communicating annoy people, and they don't tell you. They hold on to it and they let it fester until they're mad. And you have no idea you were making them mad just by emailing or calling or standing in their doorway.
Thompson was famous for not scrolling. So if you emailed him, you had to put everything in that first paragraph. If he had to scroll, you were out.
Forget about it. Your question was not answered.
Yeah.
And Michael Eisner, remember, if you didn't put page numbers, like page 4 of 5, he would throw the document away. Like he would walk out of the meeting.
The other side was for Peter, you couldn't give Peter that document if you wanted to talk about it, because Peter was so quick and so fast, he would just be going through it. You're like, no, we've got to talk about things.
Through it. Yeah.
So with Peter, you had to hand him the page at a time that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, that's super important. I know we were talking about, here we are on a Zoom talking about production management and managing creative teams. Managing
how you guys are doing it.
A team in a situation like this, it has taken, these 8 months to figure out how to do it. And I think we're still solving these problems. But I know, Angela, you had some really great insights about working in a digital pipeline, but also a pipeline that has to be managed digitally through the we're not all together in one physical space.
Yeah, as an introvert myself, there have been some strange benefits to being at home, not quite alone, but and able to get a lot of work done.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I miss, and I think a lot of production people really thrive on, is interaction with artists. Like, that's what makes our job so fun and so interesting and so satisfying. And so now we don't really have that experience. We're not running into people at the cafe or at lunch or between meetings. So everything has to be planned, right? Even a virtual coffee you have to schedule. So I think, everything just has to be thought about a little bit more in order to make things sort of feel organic, even when they're not. But in another way, one of the other things I found sort of fascinating, we do have a lot of introvert artists working in animation who, maybe in meetings don't like to talk a lot, or maybe you're really quiet normally, but in a one-on-one on a Zoom call, I have found a lot of artists talking more. And so I found this a whole thing I would not have considered. And I think it's just the safety of being with the screen. Some people are actually opening up more. So it really just depends on who it is. It's just like you were saying before, like what kind of communication works for that person. Yeah. And as a manager, you want to find that out. But through this, I'm discovering new ways of the way people like to communicate and what works. And, some people love doing a virtual lunch. Some people love that. Some people just want to do one-on-one. Some people are great with chat, but don't want to actually speak up, So there's just a whole new thing that we have to think about that we hadn't really considered before. I know a lot of people, myself included, we have worked with vendor studios where you're used to doing video conferences and having to over communicate, but doing it every day, all day is really just a whole new thing. It really is something. So, but I feel like most people are thinking about doing coffees and meetings and things to just have the social time that we're all missing,
Yeah. Absolutely.
You really have to go out of your way to make that connection and to manage those relationships. And Kathleen, you talk about sort of hard skills versus soft skills, or the right brain versus the left brain. We should talk a little bit about that. The emotional intelligence you need to bring to listen to people and figure out either.
I think the thing is we manage two things. We manage process and we manage people. The process is in our face every day. Right. The process of, oh God, we got to get these many scenes out this week, or this much footage, or this quotas, and blah, 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 right. So the other side, the managing of the people, requires us, I think, to put more emphasis on it and to really pay attention to it, because it can easily slide. And managing people isn't just about, I need your scene by Friday. It's about thinking about, okay, especially in animation, we're project by project a lot of times. And I always adopted the attitude that people should be better at the end of the project at whatever they do than when they started. And to do that, you have to make sure you're giving them work that's challenging.
Mhm.
You have to give them feedback, which never is comfortable for us, especially if it's negative feedback, but that's what we think. But positive feedback is useful too, but even negative, you have to sort of adapt or adopt the attitude that I'm telling you this because I know it. People are saying, you know, the director maybe have said this. I need to give you this feedback so that you can do better.
It's actually the
unfair
kinder,
not to give it to them.
Yeah, it's the kinder, more loving thing to give the feedback and immediately, like, and not hold on to it, not hold it back. I remember, as a PA and a production coordinator and a supervisor, I really dreaded giving negative feedback. I thought, you know, this is going to ruin my relationship. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it right. They're going to get angry. You know, it was just the worst, my worst day ever, you know. And then, you do get that emotional maturity where you learn the longer I hold on to this bad news for somebody, the worse it is for them. Like, if they go months and years not hearing something, you're right.
And they're continuing to make the same mistakes. I mean, what benefit is that to them?
It's no benefit. It's no benefit. So if you actually, I think it's really, and everybody has to figure out their style on their own, which is, how do you communicate? How do you set the table for having that conversation? How do you have that conversation with people? And you'll find your way. It's never easy to do. It's hard when you first start doing it, but you get more used to it. And if you're able to communicate clearly and in the moment, like, hey, let's go in my office, let's talk. Yeah. Hey, something just happened in that meeting. I want you to hear back. I want to reflect back, the result that has and how it may not be working the best for you. People, in my experience, 100% grateful to hear it right away and to hear it in straightforward
that
terms.
Idea of saving it up for the review or something,
for 6 months you've been hanging out there.
Never hear anything in a review that they haven't already heard it somewhere down the line.
Yes.
But a lot of times that happened. It was, I think for artists too, that's a really, and part of us as production people, we have to kind of coach our artists who become managers that they really do need to be doing that. All the way along.
And you need to build trust, and you always come with the attitude of, we're trying to help you succeed. This note will help you succeed. The director needs this out of you. So having that attitude can help you too.
Yes. And it shouldn't come as a complete surprise at the end of the year waiting for review period.
Right.
It's, cultivating that relationship with them throughout the entire time frame that you are together, and you have that communication so that, you can give the positive and you can potentially give areas for improvement. One method that I like to use whenever I get feedback is start off with something good, then talk about where where the areas that you can improve, and then end on a positive as well. So that, and a lot of times all these conversations come out where it's thank you, right? And they're really appreciative of how that conversation went.
Yeah. It's the good news sandwich. Criticism in the middle. Yeah, that's really important. That reminds me, Patty, of something I learned kind of early on, because doing rounds as a production supervisor or a PA and asking for promises earlier in the week from artists, like, what are you going to deliver this week? And then following that up all the way till Friday was a little bit uncomfortable. But I found if the first interaction I had with an artist when you're early on in the show is, hey, this is who I am. Is there anything that you need to do your job? Is there anything that you're not getting? And then often I will hear, oh, I've always wanted this piece of software, but whenever I ask for it, I never get it. It just gets busy and nobody follows through. And then you're able to give them that thing. And then when you go back and say, hey, I need this from you, it's like you have already built that little bit of trust. Like, when I ask for something, they always give it to, they make sure I get it unless it's unreasonable. And then you have that conversation. But there's a give and take of support and of each other. And then that production manager artist relationship is about mutual trust and support and making sure each other feel safe and supported while we do this hard work, because making movies is hard. Animation is hard.
I also think it's credibility, right? You have to build your credibility. I don't know that I thought about this at the time, but in retrospect, I've come to think that credibility may be the most critical piece for any of us. And what you just said there, someone asks you for something.
Yeah.
You can get that for them. Your credibility goes up. If you can't, but you come back and you say, listen, I can't do that because of this, but maybe we could do that. You're still building credibility. The worst thing is to not follow up. That is the kiss of death. And your credibility can go down really fast, you know, and that credibility is what makes the difference, I think, when you get to the point where you have to ask for the hard stuff.
Exactly. And the answer doesn't always have to be yes. Often it isn't, but it's
they want an answer. You have to give them an answer and a reason why.
Yeah. And I want to hear what you need. I'm listening. I hear what you said. I'm going to go figure it out and come back to you. Yeah. That's the building of trust. The thing is, if you go in and ask for things and you never ask, or you just ask for what you need and never ask them what they need, you know, to do their job, then, you know, right off the bat, this is a person who doesn't care. All they care about is their own job, their own productivity, not, you know, us building our relationship as a team. So you got to do both. You got to ask, you got to build trust, and then you got to follow through.
Yeah.
All right. I think the other thing we wanted to talk about, I think we covered that. I'm looking at my lists. See how slick this is? There was another little note that we were talking about in Zoom communication and managing people from afar. And also, you know, from a position as a PA or a coordinator, if you're in a Zoom, we've learned this, and we're all doing it now in my little tiny group, is announcing what you're doing. So if you're not in the Zoom, like looking into camera, making eye contact and nodding and responding, but your job is to be taking notes in that meeting, you're going to look like this. And so at the top of the meeting, you know, people can't tell, are you not paying attention? Are you bored? Are you angry? You know, what's going on with you? Just say hey, I'm the note taker in this meeting, so I'm not going to be making eye contact with the camera, but if you need anything, just shout out to me and I'll look up, you know, but I'm taking the notes. Or I work with a creative director, so he's at the top of our group as far as structure, and he draws during the entire Zoom meetings. That's the way he listens, and it's the way he contributes, because then he'll pick up his iPad and show it to the screen, like something like this. You know, it's how he interacts. But you wouldn't know that. He just looks like he's looking down at his lap. So he is constantly saying, I'm listening, everybody. I'm just drawing on my iPad as I listen. You know, I'm multitasking, so, you know, so I can contribute to this conversation.
But even in a room, that was disconcerting. You know, we could be sitting in a room and every artist is doing this, and you're like, are they listening? Are they
Am I the only one working up?
Are they doing caricatures of me while I'm sitting here? What
yes, they are. I mean,
yes,
yes, they were. Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
So it's no different. It's just a different format, but there's because that's what they do.
Yeah,
and it's good.
They do. The other thing I found is early on in my career, I was learning there's so much paperwork and like tracking to do and analysis to do at your computer. But during working hours, you know, like 9 to 6, I found that if I was in my office and stuff wasn't working on the schedule or the calendar or priorities weren't working, the answer is always out on the floor. And I would remind myself like multiple times a day, get up and go out there on the floor and talk to people. That's where you get your answers. You're not going to get it from your spreadsheet or your schedule or the lists of, you know, shots. That's important to do, and that's part of your job. But the answers are from talking to people. You know, so many times I would go into somebody's office and go, I know you're working on this scene that isn't going to come in for a week and a half, but I could really use it. And they'd be like, no, I'm almost done. And you're like, what? You know,
but isn't that a challenge for you now? I mean, that's one of the ones that I always think, you know, I always encourage people to what I called work the halls, right? Just you should be out there. People should be seeing you because they're more likely to stop and chat and tell you of issues they've got than if they have to formally come into your office. But how are you doing it now? Because obviously you don't have that option. So
exactly, like our day is pretty scheduled, and you have to have a Zoom in order to see somebody's face. But what I found is my secret weapon is there's also the scheduling. Schedule this is where I would normally run into you at the coffee, at the coffee machine, or, you kind of schedule those 15 minutes, which is exhausting. But the other one is just picking up the phone and having a good old fashioned phone call. It's such a relief after being on Zoom all day. And I found that an actual phone call now, where it used to be, don't call from your desk, get up and walk to their office. Now it feels intimate. It feels like, oh, the producer's calling on her
one-on-one.
I feel so special. And it's actually been a really good tool. And it was funny. I kind of forgot about it because it was, when you're in person, that's a no-no. Go get up from your desk and go see that person. But now it feels like a special thing, and it's like, I'm going to call you right now, oh, good. We're going to talk about this right now in real time.
Or people will step away from a Zoom meeting going, I have to take this call, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to step out of a meeting. My phone's ringing.
And text messaging too, right? We rely on text messages so much now. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, we text all day. We have a thing like an instant messaging called Teams that we're on all day long. So even if you're in a Zoom meeting, you can Teams somebody. Wow. Can you do that thing that we just talked about? And they Teams back. Yep, I'll do it right now.
Hey, Connie.
Yeah.
We didn't talk too much about organizational structure and the way the departments fit together. And you have that really great story from when you were on Atlantis and pulling inventory. I think
pulling inventory,
yeah. This is something exactly that Kathleen was talking about, like structure and pipeline, knowing what's first, second, and third. And that's really important. But the thing I learned on Atlantis early on, it was my first big movie. I had worked on Fantasia, which was like a series of shorts. But this was my first. I was in the animation department as the supervisor, and one, big chunky movie. So it was an exciting opportunity, but it was new for me. And on that movie, there was a fully animated prologue before quota even started. So there was 1,000 feet of animation that was done before my quota started. So I felt very cushy, like I got all this. I'm ahead of the game. And layout was having a little bit of a rough start. They were having a tough time getting layouts out to me, but I wasn't worried. Like for, I think a week or two, I didn't worry about it because I was like, I got 1,000 feet in the can. I'm not gonna worry about it. And finally, I think it was week 3 or something, I got called into the associate producer's office. And it was myself, a supervisor in animation, a supervisor in layout, and then the producer of the movie, the associate producer of the movie, and our production manager. And I walked in and I was like, oh, this isn't good. I think I'm in trouble. And the conversation was really important. And it was something I hadn't thought about before. I would always thought about, as soon as you get the inventory, you do the work on it and get it to the next department as fast as possible. That's my job. But I didn't think about pulling the inventory in from the department ahead of me. I didn't think about that direction at all. But it's like the pipeline's like a river, and you don't just push the water downstream, you have to pull it in. So, we left that meeting and I did feel chastised, but I also felt really inspired. It was sort of the gift of the producer that we were working with, who could tell you were doing something wrong and make you feel really good about it. So we left that meeting, and the supervisor and layout and I just went into a room and went over all of the scenes, and we talked about, what shots I could get really quickly, and which, we prioritized the next few weeks. I think we did like a 6-week plan. And so that he was hitting his quota, I was hitting my quota, both issuing and approval. And, we never had that problem again, but it was a real insight, like, okay, when you're at the top of the pipeline, at the front end, if you're not hitting your quota, then months and years down the road, the people at the end of the pipeline are really going to feel that pain. And by then, you're so far into the movie that you can't really afford them to not hit their quota.
And again, I've said this before, if everybody's job is to get the director's vision up on the screen.
Yeah.
And if you're not we think of it just as numbers and scenes that have to go through, but the truth is you're taking the director's ability to make changes away.
Yes.
You can't move it forward, right?
Yeah.
Because now they're going to get to that end where things are jamming through and they know something's wrong or something could be better. They're not going to have that opportunity because it hasn't gotten there in a timely fashion.
Absolutely. And we had a screening of Atlantis a year in, and that entire prologue got cut. So 1,000 feet. Yeah, the lead disappeared immediately.
Oh dear.
Very painful. Very, very painful. But yeah, it's a good lesson to think about the river, and you don't want your friends at the end of the pipeline in editorial and in post-production, and
you have to feel that responsibility. It's not just your department. You have to be responsible and feel the responsibility of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's not just my numbers, it's the whole movie's numbers that matter, and also doing a good job making sure that the scene gets done, the work gets done in a way that won't come back because it was done shoddily.
Mm-hmm. Things are bouncing back all the time. Something's not right.
Yeah. Yeah, animation.
I mean, it's like the importance of the master shot, right? Of how important that master shot is to get that out first before any of the other child shots.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Those same as's, it's like such a gift, but you got to make sure that
well, too many of those.
Yeah, like looks like a Hanna-Barbera TV show. Not that I don't love Hanna-Barbera,
no, but also it's false footage in some ways, right? It's going out, and it has to be dealt with, but you're not really, too much of that week after week, and it's going to come back to haunt you at some point.
Yeah, that's all dessert and no vegetables. When we were preparing for this, someone said, and I thought it was really good, is like animation is both an art form, which it absolutely is, but also a bit of a factory assembly line.
It is totally a factory. It is totally both those things, an art form.
Both those things. Yeah.
And I've always said that those things don't match up. You have an art form, you have a budget and a schedule, and we wouldn't have jobs if all that fit together easily. Those things don't fit together very easily, which has given us careers. That's
and if you treat it as a pure art form and not also work that has to get done, that's a problem. But if you treat it as a pure assembly line, just get this stuff through, or just got to get it through, that's a problem too. So again,
it is really the balance.
It's the plate spinning and the balance, and production management is the place that has to keep that big picture in mind and make sure we're serving both things. We're getting the work done, but it's being done at a level of excellence that is going to serve the movie and not come back, because that's another thing. The pipeline is left to right. Nothing should go backward. I mean, sometimes it does, but as little as possible should go backwards in the pipeline. That's when red flags should go up, when too many shots are going backwards in the pipeline. Cool. Another thing we were kind of talking about is knowing your role. Like, what is my role in the room, or even a Zoom virtual room? As a PA, as a coordinator, as a supervisor. Anybody want to chime in and talk about that? I know I've had my experiences.
Well, I mean, I know that even as a PA, when, as a producer, I was looking at different PAs and we were assessing, how everyone was doing. One of the things that was brought up was a PA should never piss anybody off, right? But as you go higher up the chain of command, it doesn't mean that you have the, okay to piss somebody off. But again, obviously the job changes a little bit so that you have the ability to be able to say no. Whereas as a PA, really, you shouldn't be, if an artist asks you for something, it is not your place to be able to say no right there, right? It's, let me get back to you on that. Let me figure out what I can do. And even as a producer, I also did the same thing. I might not have the answer right away, but I would always be like, let me see what I can do, whether that's borrow resources from something, or can I get you additional time, or whatever that might be, to, ultimately get, hopefully find that happy medium, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You have
Yeah,
to have a sense of who you are in the room. I mean, that's what I always felt like. Reading the room was a thing that was a really important skill. And it meant, okay, did I call the meeting and therefore I'm the person running this thing?
yes.
Or am I taking the notes? You know, who am I in the room? And a lot of times, you know, wherever you are, there's going to be meetings you're in that everybody else is higher up the food chain than you are, or the vice versa. And you have to understand that. You have to be clear. The other thing I think is I never, sorry, a motorcycle just went by, I apologize. I think it's meetings get tossed off a lot is just, oh, I got to go to another meeting, blah, 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 blah. But truthfully, to be successful, you should never go to a meeting without knowing what the topic is and with a plan of what you're going to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a situation where finally the people that you need to make a decision are in that room finally together, and you've got that opportunity.
Yeah.
But always know, and it didn't matter who we were meeting with. We always took 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even approval sessions, right? Before you go in the room. Okay, we're going to see 10 scenes. I got to let the director know we need 7 of them. You know, whatever it is, have that before you go in the room. Know exactly what it is you want to get out of the meeting and what's expected of you in the meeting. And that's the way to be the most successful at those things and using them well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're on the attendee list, there's a reason you're in that room.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're a PA or a coordinator and everybody else is directors and artists and producers, there's a reason. Either you're there to take notes, and I was anguished when I first started because I'm introverted as well, naturally. But when do I didn't get that. I didn't get what they just said. I don't know what to put in the notes. Do I interrupt? Do I say something? What page of the script was that? You know, and then, you know, you finally get to like, well, that's my job. My role here is to capture this information so that the written notes can reflect what they talked about. So you have to speak up and say, I didn't catch that. What page is that on? You know, is that the bottom half of the page? And, you know, people will be grateful that you spoke up. They want the notes to be accurate. They want you to know that you're listening and doing your job. And you know when to speak up, or even if you're just the person who's in control of the calendar and putting meetings on the calendar, you know, to speak up and say, we're 15 minutes from the end of this meeting. Do you want me to tell the next department you're going to be late to their meeting, or should we schedule another half hour to do this tomorrow, or get back to this tomorrow? Those are important skills to learn. That's why you're in the room. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on the attendee list. You know, so there's reasons for you to be there.
And I would also, you know, I'd get, when I would be producing, you know, you get a call and you'd have some meeting at the studio and you're like, I don't know. I literally would call people's assistants and say, you know what, I'm not 100% sure what this is about, and I want to make sure I bring the right information with me.
Yeah.
You know what the topic is, or can you let me know what they're thinking of talking about? Because, you know, things appear on, especially now, things just appear on your schedule. No one's even asked you.
What is that thing?
What the heck's that? What am I supposed to do with that? And really, I think it's an important thing, again, for you to be prepared so that you're not sitting there, oh, I don't know. You know, those aren't good answers.
Absolutely.
And you know, it's also important at the end to button it all up and, hey, let's recap. Here's what we discussed, and here's the follow-ups. You said you're going to do this. You're going to do that. I'm going to do this. You're going to set the follow-up meeting, so everyone comes out of it knowing, here's what we agreed to, and here's what needs to happen next.
Absolutely. And I always said, like, meeting notes are where information goes to die, because even though as important as it is, if there are to-do notes at the end of your notes, email them out, call the people, you know, and say, did you get that to-do item that is for you, you know, to make sure that they got it. Once you've told them, and, you know, it's not just written in the notes and, well, I emailed it in the notes, you know, it's off your plate. Now it's their responsibility to follow up on, but you got to get it to that hand, carry it to that person.
Yeah.
And Connie, I like that you mentioned about the accuracy of the notes, because in a lot of times when working in animation, people are using artistic jargon that, as a production person, some people are very familiar with and some people are not familiar with. They don't come from an artistic background, right? So I think, Troy, I think you know what I'm about to say, right? But you know, take down the notes accurately, but don't interpret the notes, right? and then distribute it out, because then the director might come back and be like, that's not what I said. That's, so that's another thing where it's like, it's not your job to interpret the notes, but just it's making sure that they're accurate and they're distributed to the right person.
Yeah.
And also, just in talking about the approval session, I always liked starting off and encouraging my team to always set the stage at the beginning of the approval session, right? Where, you're talking about, especially when you're looking at a shot and you're saying, this is the third time we've seen this. We bid only 9 days for it. We're at 7 days now, right? So, that kind of setting the stage versus having the directors constantly give notes, because if you present it in front of them, their job is to give notes or to approve it without knowing context of how it all fits in with everything else.
And in fairness to the director, you have to be able to say, by the way, you saw this last week, you wanted this, and this change done, it's been done. They're seeing stuff all the time.
They can't remember.
You really can't.
Yeah.
I'm amazed they remember as much as they do. Or lead animators when they're looking at these. I'm always amazed at how much they remember.
And
but
how they don't
give them a break.
Give them a break. Their brain is tired.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was on a movie and we would do art department rounds, and they would show, like, here's a bow tie. Is that approved? Like, whose bow tie is it?
How big is it on screen?
Is this a background character? Is it my lead? Can we have some context? What did we talk about before? Our department's just desperate to check boxes instead of giving the director some context about what they're looking at and what their note is going to mean downstream. Like, later on, you're going to see that in a shot and you're going to be upset because it's the lead's thing and not a background character, and we didn't tell you that.
Yeah, you're giving them the information they need to make a good decision.
Yeah. Managing up.
Yeah. The other thing we talked about is learning how important iteration is in animation. It is an iterative process. I don't think there's any department in which the first pass is approved. Very rare, very, very rare. Yeah, and that's true of screenings, and it's true of character design. Almost every element of an animated movie, because we don't get anything for free, has to be created, and it takes iteration and plan on it. That's another big red flag. If you're out of time and you're in a department saying, we don't have any time to do more than one pass at this thing, that should be something you talk about before you go into the approval. You should go to your direct report and say, I'm looking at the schedule. There's only enough time to do one iteration of this thing. Is that going to fly? Can we talk about that before we get into approvals and are all freaking out and kind of passive aggressively, pressuring the director to just like it? That's not going to go over well. That's not going to get a good reaction.
Or if that really is the case and everyone is okay with it, that director will make extra care in that launch to make sure that all the information is presented at that time.
Exactly. That's when you should talk about it, is in the launch, not in the approval. Like, you're going to see this once and then it's done, Yeah. We always talk about, big approval sessions, or right now I'm working in development. So our big approval is the green light presentation to the studio. And it shouldn't feel like you don't know what's going to happen in that room. It should feel like going to the DMV. You have studied, you've had all the conversations, offline leading up to that thing. You've over prepared. So when you get into the room, you pretty much know what's going to happen in that room. You may not know everything about what the studio's thinking or what their priorities are, but it isn't like, I have no clue what's going to happen. You're prepared, for that big presentation. You've had the conversations leading up to it. And so you're relatively secure about it being a successful thing. Cool. So this is all in the section of anticipating, knowing your pipeline, knowing the structure, communicating effectively, pulling and pushing inventory up and down hopefully down the production pipeline. Kathleen, I think we had talked about a list that you had done when we were at Disney about all the different production roles and what percentage of their day goes to what thing. This goes to knowing your role and understanding what your role is at different stages.
Yeah, and I think that what it was is a percentage of actual specific work you do, and then percentage of overseeing work, right? And the higher you go in the structure of animation, but I think it applies to any business,
yeah,
you do less of the doing and more of the overseeing. Yeah. And it was one of the things because a lot of times I sort of had those kind of wacky projects. So I had a lot of first time directors or first time, an artist managing, a background painter who's now managing the other background painters, or with CG and stuff specifically. A lot of artists, it's their comfort zone is to sit down, like someone's working on stuff and really knock them away and do it themselves, right? Because it's quicker and easier and then they'll get it. But the real thing is to convince them of, you're now at a point where you have to see that things get done. It's not doing them yourself. Now, of course, as it depends where you are, and some percentage of work you may still have to do. But the truth is, and it does apply to other businesses, that as you rise up, you do less work, specific work, and you're now you're analyzing work, you're reading reports, you're planning stuff, so that your job changes from doing the actual work to figuring out how the work is going to get done. And I think that's a really critical piece when you're dealing with artists who are managing for the first time. That's a new thing to them. This is completely non-animation, but I started in theater, and I remember once I was working with a guy. It was his first time. He had been a carpenter and an electrician, and now he was overseeing the crew. And I came to the theater. He was on a gigantic ladder, which always makes me nervous anyways. Heights aren't my thing. And so even when someone else is up there, it makes me nervous. And he was at the top, and there were 4 people on the stage waiting for him to come down to ask him questions. And I thought, this is the exact visual that you want. He should be on the stage and someone else should be up there. But he knew he could fix that problem. But in the long term, that doesn't help you.
Right.
That's so important, Kathleen. And I see this all the time with the managers and the supervisors I work with. You have to learn how to delegate.
Yeah.
If you can't, you're not going to survive, and you're not going to rise up, because if you're managing, supervising the art department, that's one thing. It's your own little shop. But to become the production manager, you've got the whole show now to oversee.
Well, and it goes back to what we talked about before, that if your job is to manage the people who work for you and get them to be better, you should be giving them challenging tasks. So look at your list every day. And yeah, sure, there's something you can do like that, but it's really better to give it to somebody else. Well, and it's for the long term of the production, because later on, you just need them to be doing stuff.
Well, and I think people also, just in a controlling way, want to feel like they're indispensable, and that, well, no, I got to do all of this stuff. So if you step away for a day and everything falls apart, you're not doing a good job. You've got to make yourself so that you can step away
Well, I've said this before, Troy, so this. I think you're giving me a lead in, Troy. I know. I always said that I was working at making myself superfluous. I never fully accomplished that, but that was my goal.
Yeah.
If I could make all the right decisions, hire all the right people, give them all the right assignments, then really I didn't have anything to do.
Yeah. But
that was the critical piece.
It's such an important thing. I remember hearing that, and it stuck with me all these years, Kathleen, because it's kind of radical to think, well, wait a minute, if I'm superfluous, they'll fire me and I don't have a job. No, you're working on the the health of the whole show by empowering people, strengthening them, and being up above to help, sort of lightly with a hand on the rudder, helping get where you need to go. And that's the shift you have to make in mentality of, giving as much of stuff away and making yourself superfluous in a sense, but
And looking at your list, what can I have someone else do?
absolutely.
And, you know, again, the thing is, we know with animation, it's a long process and it's a
Very
hard process.
Yeah.
And if you're not at the beginning of the process, helping the people working for you get better at what they do,
That's
you're
right.
going to pay the price for that later on somewhere.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
And it's growth opportunities for other people as well. And
Yeah.
especially when, you know,
So
somebody's on vacation and, you know,
Yeah.
somebody needs coverage of that department, those are perfect opportunities to be able to gain like insight from, if you're always a front end supervisor, right? And then, you know, now lighting needs somebody, right? Now that's an opportunity for you to be able to, you know, gain some insight in there. And also, you know, shadowing people if you want to grow, right?
Yeah.
Shadow as much as you can and be like, hey, can I be a fly on the wall and be in that meeting just to, you know, I won't say anything, or, you know, but just to understand how these decisions,
Yeah.
you know, overall affect the larger
It goes
picture.
back to what you were saying about understanding the structure, right? You want to know, how does that department further out use the stuff my department does? And the
Yes.
more you know, the more useful you are to the production and more likely that you're going to get promoted the next time around, because now you have more information, more skills.
Absolutely right. I mean, we all come to these jobs with strengths and weaknesses. I mean, that's just natural. We're human beings. We're not great at everything, except for Kathleen. She's great at everything. But you know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and you know, make alliances. I mean, that's something I think we lost, and we're getting Angela Lepito back.
Yeah.
Know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and I did that. I kind of made the mistake because I fell in love with the front end, doing story and animation,
Yeah.
and then development for 7 years at Disney, and now 3.5 years at WAG. And you know, so my weakness is absolutely the back end and post-production. So those are not strengths that I have. And I was just so fortunate to partner with and make an ally of a post-production supervisor who we worked together. And I, you know, that's a relationship that it was so important for me, because like that completes me. You know, I don't know those things, but I know I can pick up the phone and say, I don't know this. And the same for that person. They can call me about front end things.
Yeah.
And it's sort of learning about your fellow, this is the managing sideways parts, like your fellow production supervisors and coordinators and PAs. I think we've gotten into our third section, which is about your career path and about taking care of yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You're going to be with these people on one movie for years. So build those relationships, take care of each other. Also, if you start as a PA and you stay in this industry, you will work with each other over and over and over again until you're hiring each other for things later on. So it's important to keep those relationships and support each other and be each other's allies.
For
Well,
sure.
And it's okay that you're not promoted after one picture as well,
Yes.
because there's always something to learn. There's always somewhere areas to grow. And even if you've only worked at one company, not every company will do it the same way, right? Like DreamWorks will do things differently than Disney, and even, you know, an outside studio or even somewhere across the country, in a different country, because, you know, business company cultures are different. Their processes are different, their budgets are different. So there's, you know, lots of factors that you have to kind of, as a production person, also be able to be flexible and modify how you work.
Especially if, like Patty, like you have gone from industry to industry, and you've wanted to take that leap from TV to feature, or from feature to games and back again, then it's really important to have those relationships and allies and keep flexible and learning. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I don't learn something new about this job, and I've been doing it for almost 30 years. So it's kind of amazing. But
well, you go back to their basic skills you're going to need wherever you go, whatever you do, right? You're going to have to understand that you're managing people. You are going to have to manage up well. You are going to have to build credibility. These are things where it doesn't matter what, as Patty has proven, you can go do different things. Mm-hmm. Truthfully, the thing that kept me able to work for the Walt Disney Company for 20 years is I continually did different projects, different kinds of projects, from stop motion and CG and traditional animation that, you know, kept me engaged. But also, the more you know, the more useful you are, right? The more you can, and it's all relatable and transferable. It really is. It doesn't really, the idea of being a good manager and what it takes to be a good manager, it doesn't matter what the process is. Your skills will translate and work on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to agree, because all of my jobs have been jobs I didn't know were jobs. Like, who knew that was a job, guys? I had no idea. Like, I didn't go to college thinking I was going to do the jobs I've done. Didn't know they were jobs. And so I felt like every one of these opportunities has built like not a little bit more knowledge that feeds the next one, that builds a little more knowledge that feeds the next one. And that, coupled with the relationships, is really like, you know, I've had some amazing experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for some reason, I continually got things I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
You're a good problem
I
solver.
didn't know anything about stop motion. I didn't know, you know, Pixar in the early days, a render farm. We have to have a render farm. You know, I mean, those were things that you kind of, those things are learnable. The basic skills you need to be a good manager will translate to any of those things.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah, absolutely. So I know we're getting a little stack of questions here.
Okay.
Matt, should we just look at the list and make our way through it?
Well,
Sure.
I think we might be at the end of our time for the panel. But there is a lot of questions. A lot of people are saying this has been their favorite panel so far, and it's been super helpful. But is there any way maybe that any resources or any way people might be able to find answers to their questions beyond this panel?
Well, I do want to do a little shout out, because Tina Price, who is the inventor of CTN and the
Many
founder
things.
of it,
Of many, many things.
of many things.
She's an excellent example of a person who took her career in her own hands
Yes.
and
Yeah,
kept growing.
Absolutely.
Perfect example.
But she would love to make a place at CTN year round for us to have production management conversations like this, and especially for people who are looking for internship opportunities or PA opportunities to get started. And so, I just want to say, I hope CTN is a resource like this, because as a producer, when I need a PA, I need a good person who I know will hit the ground running. And so, we would love to make a place to get people up to speed so that they can take a PA job when they're available, because you kind of need somebody immediately. It's never like, oh, I need a PA in 3 months. That's not the way that works. So I'd love for this to be an ongoing resource. But I would also say network. Women in Animation is a great group. There's a group called Black Women Animate that I love, that has had a yearly Los Angeles get together. What other resources are there for production management?
I mean, I think informational meetings with different people in the pipeline is really useful, just to learn about their jobs. I think people are usually open to talking about themselves. So I'm always willing to talk to people about their interest in the industry. So I feel like networking and talking to people, you learn a lot about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the reason all of you and I are doing this panel is there were people early on in my career who were willing to give me time to just take them to coffee and buy them a cup of coffee and talk to them for 20 minutes about how to get into the animation industry and what were the best things I needed to know. I want to give back, so I just reach out to people who you admire. Like, when you see a TV show or a movie and you see who the producer is or the production manager, just reach out to them. This is a small industry, and it's a friendly one. It's a nice corner of the entertainment industry, that's for sure. So yeah, we're willing to reach out and help people into the industry if this is a passion for you. And you better love it, because it's hard work.
And Connie, you touched a little bit on internships, but that is definitely a great opportunity to get your foot in the door and get the lay of the land and meet as many people as you want. It's not so much about, especially if you're interning at a union shop, it doesn't mean that you'll be able to provide any artwork that might show up on the screen because of the union guidelines, but it's a great opportunity to understand how production works, how the pipeline works, meet as many people as you can. Even if you're an artist and want to get into the industry and you're getting an internship, show people your artwork. Be open to that feedback, because a lot of times some artists are very protective of their artwork and say it's not ready yet to show, come back later. But that's a great time. But even in production, right, it's talk to as many departments as you can, talk to artistic supervisors as well, and tell them about your interest, why you're interested in animation. And even in that interview process as well, right? That I always wanted to hire interns that this was not just a job, but this was an opportunity that's going to launch them onto their next step.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you want somebody who loves animation and wants to do that.
Yep.
It makes a big difference in the kind of person they are to work with.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here, and thank you for dedicating an hour to talk. I'm sorry we couldn't get through all the questions. I saw Troy answered a bunch in the Q&A, which
I'm busy typing away.
I super appreciate that. I'll leave those in for the beginning of the next panel, so anyone who's here can look over them. But
Cool.
yeah, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Kathleen.
Thank you.
John,
Troy.
it's good to
Bye.
see all
Nice
you
seeing
guys.
everyone.
Good to see you
And I
guys.
see Tad Gilo is on my screen, and I want to just say hi, Tad, in the shout out. I haven't seen Tad in years. So
Hi, Chad. Take care, everybody. Be safe.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.